Again, I have to bring you to something you said earlier about the cost of, having people unemployed is greater than having a heavy recurrence expenditure.
Yes.
And you talked about how states were delicately balancing that better than the federal government. Do you think that is also a little artificial in the sense that no one is really talking about how many people the states have in the employment? It wasn't until recently that, in the recent past that there was an increase in wage bill, and you found many states kicking vehemently against it, and it was just the federal government that was willing to pass it. You also have a case where we're being told that the minimum wage is not really enough for anyone to be able to live on. Are we really doing things, properly as we should, or we're doing it at a very superficial level?
You could not plan employment in any nation based upon some fit and starts planning. Development must be by deliberate planning. It cannot be by default. For example, have we not actually abandoned development planning in this country? I mean, we have subjected it to MTEF and this. We actually know that the MTEF does not work, really. So if we must really bring in the issue of employing people, it has passed table talk. It is now a situation of war, a situation of paralysis, that government must deliberately, without even identifying the implication, the cost implication for now, to just employ people directly. You can employ them in categories and say, okay, well, we want to put them in NIFO, for example, Institute for Oil Palm Research, for example. You could mobilize people into fisheries, and government can do that. Agric settlements. Chief Obafemi did that successfully by creating agricultural settlements across the southwestern part of Nigeria.
Give us your analysis.
What's wrong with that?
Give us your perspective now that you've focused on this one, because today we've got challenge with funding agriculture.
Yes.
You have entrepreneurs, I think some of them are now referred to as agropreneurs. They've got challenge accessing funds.
Oh, yes.
How do we reconcile all of that with what used to happen then?
Yeah, we have Bank of Agriculture, for example.
Is that sufficient?
So that's not sufficient. But then, why the youth? Because it's very difficult to convince the youth to go into agriculture. Agriculture is an extremely risky investment. So risky, highly dependent on weather, dependent on conditions outside of the human effort, dependent on conditions of force majeure. So if you must convince people, then there must be, first of all, a ready market. That when we produce, for example, crops, you are ready to buy from us. It is only government that can do that. Even the United States, where we have less than 6% of the population involved in agriculture, but has capacity to feed not just the country, but to export abroad. Government subsidizes.
Isn't that a good market already?
Oh, that's, of course. Government subsidizes. Government also provides for, conditions that will permit them to go into agriculture. These things are just not available here, apart from the issue of fertilizer, subsidies, and what has happened to our National Agricultural Land Development Agencies, for example. The oil palm developments and
we had the Minister of Agriculture here who talked about resuscitating those agencies,
yes,
those agricultural agencies.
Yes.
Apparently the government is working towards that. But do you think they're serious about it? Commitment.
Working towards it till eternity. Yes, maybe in the year 3030. But if the government really wants to
That's definitely not very optimistic, is it?
Yes. but then if the government wants to employ people, it has to be here in the year 2014. In the year 2014.
You see, that issue of government deliberately employing people is one that some of the viewers are actually commenting on, that government can't employ everybody.
Yes, that's true. Government can't employ everybody, but government can employ most people. I mean, we've come to that situation, a situation in which the facilities that we make people to establish jobs themselves, they are just not there. So what do? A situation in which, if we should permit these people to continue to be jobless, it will create so much social deficits for us as to completely wipe out our civilization.
Okay,
we must do something.
When you talked about the Bank of Agriculture,
yes.
But let's look at the other banks. The Monetary Policy Committee sat recently, and they rose, still leaving the what's it called now, at 12%.
Even interest rates.
Interest rate at 12%. It has been like that for a long time. And that means the interest rates, when you go borrowing money from the bank, the interest rates would appear to be rising. So how will this work out? Funding agriculture, indeed, funding private businesses, as you said.
And they're usually short-term loans,
Thank you very much.
not long-term.
Short-term loans. You cannot bring short-term loans into long-term investment. Agriculture is actually a long-term investment. Gestation periods can last for about 36 months. I doubt if there's any bank that will be ready, for example, to place its funds at such a trajectory of risk. I doubt it.
What was banking about if they don't take risks?
Well, they take risks, but you don't take some risk that will injure your assets. You see, I mean, you are just sure. You must take risks that, head or tail, you are most likely to win.
Talk about the role of corruption in this, because it would seem that you can have the most fantastic idea if we cannot tackle corruption that seems to there seems to affect every single thing that we do. We would not be making progress.
You're right. Corruption. We can speak from here to the next 30 days on corruption in Nigeria. If there's anything that is the debilitating factor in our development that has become almost intractable, it is corruption. Corruption is not only about stealing money, no. It's also about ensuring that the due process of law is not fulfilled, that you permit those who have devalued the due process to go scot-free without being punished. It is just enough to make a whole system corrupt by refusing to punish evil. If, for example, a student has cheated in an exam and has succeeded, and you refuse to bring him or her to book, what you have actually told the remainder is that cheating pays. So you've corrupted that exam. The certificate arising from that exam is itself corrupted.
Do you think we're making progress in tackling that?
No, we are making absolutely no progress in corruption.
Wow.
Absolutely no progress in containing corruption.
If you hold that view,
Yes.
what role do you think it's had in affecting, where we currently are in terms of being ranked by the World Bank as extremely poor?
Of course, because one of the reasons why we are poor is that we have refused to sanction corruption. That's one of the reasons. Another reason why we are also poor is that the government is shying for some of its responsibilities. So
Both at the state and federal level?
at all governments. The only thing is that why we blame the federal government for most of the problems, it's not because we are enemies of the federal government. No, it is because the federal government has appropriated most of the responsibilities in this country, but has dispensed them in such a way that it calls to question the justification for appropriating those roles.
But are we encouraged by the states alone to make a case for them to the federal government? Because if you've got however amount of money you have, and you can't account for that properly, at least to see that your IGR grows and development spread across the states, what then? How do you begin to make a case for them to the federal government?
Let us do that first. Let's devolve the power to them first and see how they do with it. If they've done it before, we had Western state before, the Northern state, the Eastern state, the Midwestern state. Were they not a success?
You think we should go back
Of course. What is wrong with 1963 Constitution? Constitutional conferences, we don't need that. You just wake up the 1963 Constitution, a fantastic document. Or at best, you go for the 1960 Constitution. The regions. Let me say this. Why do you even have 36 states of the Federation, for example? Are they not actually wasteful centers? Is there anything so fundamentally different between Ekiti and Ondo State that they cannot be in one place?
So you think
Is there anything so fundamentally between Adamawa and Taraba State
What
that
do
they
you
cannot be in
recommend?
the same place? I recommend 6 states for Nigeria. No more than 6 states. And Abuja, a mayoralty. No more.
Interesting. Let's take this comment from Oluwaseun. He says he went to the Bank of Agriculture and modalities for getting loans won't encourage any entrepreneur. Because you were talking about, we have that bank, and so who knows, it will help. So
Yes, that's the
maybe
difference.
his case here, who knows?
Okay, that is the difference between advertised government intention and actually what happens on the ground. Any bureaucrat, any angry bureaucrat can frustrate any intention, no matter how beautiful. No matter how beautiful. So if you have a disconnect, for example, between what government has advertised as happening or obtainable in the Bank of Agriculture and what you actually have on the ground there, then of course it will be vintage.
But do you
in
also
Nigerian
think
system.
that this could be as a result of not knowing how to. Because in this, a host of banks have also said that sometimes they have monies to give out, but when you ask for proposals, what you get is not very convincing. And, you know, people now know that they need to sometimes employ other people to help write a proper proposal to the banks. Do you think that that could also, it could be a matter of education?
You're right. That could be just part of it, but that's marginal. How many proposals for successes, for example, can actually be written and cast in such a statement as to say that they will be faultless? Most proposals, most businesses that start and start successful today started with some mistakes too. They make their mistakes. Bad proposals that are made right as a result of experience you gain on the field. You don't start by having an higher cast, perfect, good written proposals at a time, especially surely not in agriculture.
How about the fact that we've privatized the electricity sector? If we get it right, aren't we on the way to getting it right in the first place? To jump-starting our economy.
That's extremely funny. You privatized the electricity sector, but has it translated to having electricity?
No. Do we expect immediate transformation?
Why shouldn't we? You see, it is not proper for people to begin to deceive all the people all the time. See, from 1933, for example, we had the telephone, the ITT, International Telephone, and all this. And between that time and the year 2001, it only gave Nigerians 315,000 lines, most of them epileptic. But from 2001, when they have the private sector going into it, up to today now, we have in Nigeria more than 40 million active lines. That's the power of the private sector. Yes.
Which has come into power.
Well, yes. But then you will see the difference between the intention and the zeal, the political will to do that, and what we now have at present. Even the privatization of electricity is not yet complete. Transmission, for example, generation, for example, marketing, distribution. These are the different departments in the generation and the delivery of electricity.
Which is why it's a completely different scheme from the telecommunication sector.
It is completely different. But you have a station in which you have just privatized. People are charged bills. Some say crazy bills. I don't care. But they are charged bills for supplying no electricity. Now, is it not even better for those companies, the privatized companies, to just collect money for not supplying electricity than for them to now go supply electricity and then charge the same bills? So it's like government is protecting those companies, but it's not asking them for service. For example, I expect a moratorium or a declaration that no bills should ever be served to anybody except the electricity comes in. Can government do that? By removing the immunity of NEPA or PHN, whatever name they are called.
What happens to the privatization then, the private sector? Won't they collapse if you say no bill? How do they make money?
Okay, you want to make bills from people to whom you have supplied your electricity? Is that not itself cheating and stealing?
I know we're almost out of time, but just this question here. A country like China has a 500-year plan, I think. Some other countries have long-term plans.
Yes.
But yet they've been named amongst the impoverished countries of the world.
Yes.
How do we move out of this place, I mean Nigeria, without a long-term plan? Even though those that have long-term plans are also there.
Vision 2020.
It's going to be better. Now, you can't say it better. Well, you're actually saying that we need a plan. We need to plan. We cannot begin to expect that we will develop without a plan. I think I agree with you.
We have Vision 2020, don't we?
Of course.
That's a plan.
That's a wish. That's not a plan.
All right, Dr. Tunji Ogunyemi is a budget historian. We looked at that World Bank rating where Nigeria is considered as part of the 80 extremely poor countries. Yeah, that's a tough one. And then we also looked at the budget. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you so much.
All right, then we'll return after this break. Join us again.